Spirit of the Lord is upon me. Spirit of the Lord is upon me. Because He has anointed me to do the work I need to do. Proclaim good news to those near and far. Proclaim good news to those near and far. Jesus loves you no matter who you are. So always remember, He'll give you hope for tomorrow. Never forget, He'll give you joy for your sorrows.
Good evening. I'm your host, Reverend Dale Roberts, and again, I'm so honored, I'm so pleased, and I'm so delighted that you tuned in again today to Hope for the Brokenhearted. Well, we're beginning a brand new theme entitled Heart to Heart, and I have a special guest coming in today, my friend Sarah O'Neill Rush, and she's going to share with us some things from her new book. So let's begin again today. Sarah, I am so honored to have you here again as a guest. But just for some of my new viewers, tell us a little something. Introduce yourself and tell us a little something about yourself.
Okay, well, as you know, I'm Sarah Washington O'Neill Rush, and I recently wrote a book, my autobiography, which is why I'm here today, and it tells a lot about what I'm doing today, which includes I'm a published author. This is my second book. I also am an adjunct professor at Argosy University. I teach courses in psychology. I'm the founder of the Booker T. Washington Empowerment Network, which is a nonprofit that helps disadvantaged youth and young adults and adults. And I write a newsletter and different things. I'm doing a gamut of things right now.
Sarah, you are one busy woman.
I
am. But Sarah, what I'm excited about today is that you wrote a book entitled Rising Up from the Blood. Yes. And I am so proud of you, Sarah.
Thank you.
First, I was on the plane going to Florida, and I began to read your book, and Sarah, I couldn't put it down.
Wow. That's encouraging.
Sarah, I'm not just saying that. Yeah. I've read different autobiographies, but when I read your autobiography, it's just like you put us right in the scenario where you were.
Okay, well, that was my goal, so I appreciate hearing that, and I've heard it a few times now, and it just feels really good.
I'm sure it does to have people tell you that they felt the experience along with you.
Yes, and that they couldn't put it down. That's the best part, I think.
I was like, I can't put this down. I am so proud of you. I am so proud of you, Sarah. Now, Sarah, moving right along, what inspired you at this time in your life to write your autobiography?
Okay, well, actually, I would say I finished it at this time in my life, but I began it probably, I believe, around 2002.
Really?
And it started with doing an autobiography for my undergraduate course, and we had to do, I believe, like a 15-page autobiography, so I did that. And from there, I started just writing manually. I had about 88 pages when I finished, manually written about my life. And that, again, this was in 2002. And then the Reverend Harry Williams from Allen Temple, he met with me, and I can't remember why we were meeting, but just, we knew we were like-minded.
Oh, yes.
And so at the end of the meeting, as far as helping people in the community to rise above struggles, and so at the end of our meeting, I said, well, what can you do for me? What can you do to help me? And he said, and I told him about the written manuscript, and he said, give me that manuscript. So I did, and I entrusted it with him, and he took it, and then we started meeting once a week for about a year, I'd say, and he'd interview me, and in that time we did a whole chapter. We finalized the chapter, And then we stopped meeting. Life happened, and in his life he had other things he had to do, and so for a couple of years it was just sitting down again. And then I met the New York Times best-selling author Mary B. Morrison.
Oh my goodness.
Who writes quite different from me. She writes novels, a little raunchy. but
anyway.
She's a New York Times best-selling author, and she was impressed by my story.
I'm sure.
And so she put me in touch with friends of hers, Tony and Yvonne Rose, and they just took it over and we gave it life. I hired her. Yvonne Rose is an editor, and as you can see, Tony Rose did the foreword, and he was awarded the NAACP Image Award for Literature, and he was pretty impressed with my story too, so he did the foreword, and we finished it in October, I believe, and published it by December. And then I started putting it out there in January.
Well, I tell you, you put out some good stuff here, Sarah.
Yeah,
this is some excellent writing.
Thank you so much.
Now, Sarah, what inspired you to give it this title?
Well, I had initially, when I was working with Reverend Harry Williams, we had another title, and that title was Up from the Hood. But I had people that would give me pushback on that title, and they said that friends and associates, and they said, well, I don't, there's certain people that aren't going to buy the book with that title, and I was sort of married to the title. I loved it, Up from the Hood, because Booker T. Washington, his best-selling,
and you're the great
granddaughter of Booker T. Washington, and his book was Up from Slavery. And that was a best-selling book as well, autobiography. And so I wanted Up from the Hood. But I said, okay, I gave in. Tony Rose was really big on changing the name. And so he and I kind of compromised on Rising Up from the Blood.
Well, I'm telling you, Sarah, like I said, I can't keep stressing this to you. I am so proud of you.
Thank you.
Because when I read it, I could feel you, Sarah.
All right, and I appreciate that so much.
And it was like you had no mask on.
No, I'm not good at wearing masks.
No, and so truthful.
Yeah.
Did it take a lot of courage to write this, Sarah?
It did, and it still does now that it's out there.
I'm sure. I am sure.
Yeah, and especially among family members and people who were close to my mother and my father, because I do kind of put it out there, and things that people, because my mom, when I was born, she was almost 40 and my father was 45, and they kept a lot of secrets and ignored a lot of problems. And so now that they're both passed away and I put the book out, I only have one living aunt, and she's 88. She's the granddaughter of Booker T. Washington. She was the last born granddaughter and the last of the descendants in that generation that's still living. And she was very close to my mother. There were 4 daughters born to Booker T. Washington's youngest son, Ernest Davidson. And so she and my mother was the oldest and she was the youngest, and they were the closest at the time that my mom passed away. And she, very nervous about what she was going to think about the book. And it turned out that she had some issues with it, and her daughter also did, her daughter took me under her wing when we're 9 years apart, and when I was like 7, 8, 9, and she was a teenager, and she is very close to my mother as well. That was my mom's niece, and I guess around February they kind of let me know that they were a little disappointed, and so that hurt. It hurt a lot, and my aunt didn't want me to get emotional, but I told her it's hard not to get emotional because I felt like I hurt her, and I wasn't trying to do that. They felt like I disrespected my parents, and so they brought in scripture, which hurt even more.
Oh, I'm sure. I am sure.
Because I up until then, and still, they didn't convince me I was going against God's will for my life, but up until then, I just knew that it was God's plan for my life to come through this the way that I did and be able to talk about it and share, because my experience has been when I do speaking engagements and I open up, I always have people come up to me and say, you know, I had this happen to me. They tell me things that they never told anyone before. And so I always felt like it was God's plan. So then when they threw the 10 Commandments, thou shalt, well, you know, your reverend.
Right. Which one?
It's the part about your mother and honor your mother and father. Yeah, that hurt a lot. And for my mother, so I did some calling around to see what other people thought. And I haven't got yet that anyone got that from my book, that I was dishonoring my parents. But I was telling the truth. And even with my mom, because I was very close to my mother, that they feel like I honored her in a lot of ways. I dedicated the book to her. But my father, that one, but it's true. It's the truth.
It's the truth. Yeah. And this is just my opinion. Yes. When I was reading it, I sensed a deep respect for your mother and your father. Even in the midst of all the drama, I really sensed that through the book, you were still giving them the respect that was due them.
Okay.
But also when I read the book, I thought to myself, how are people going to respond to Sarah after writing this awesome autobiography?
Right. And it's still scary, you know. I often wonder what are people who read it thinking, but for the most part, the people that tell me about it, aside from my aunt and my cousin, they have your same reaction.
Yes.
Because I think, wow, they're going to see I did these things, I did that things, because people look at me and they think that I lived this fairy tale princess life. And far from it, and so when they find out about it, I think, you know, are they going to judge me, criticize me? And so far, if they are, they're not telling me, and I guess that's to be expected too.
Actually, knowing that you're the great granddaughter of Booker T. Washington, you wouldn't have thought that you went through so much.
Exactly.
And I think maybe that's the part that might surprise people. To know that even though you come from a rich background, that you're still human.
Exactly.
That you
my parents were human.
Yes.
And they made the same mistakes that kids that are living, you know, in inner cities and urban cities and disadvantaged children, they're experiencing the same things, and I want to let them know, you know, so did I, and this is how I was able to rise above it.
And I thank God for it, because it's so refreshing, Sarah, to for people to just be truthful. You know, we can wear so many masks, but when I read the book, I was like, okay, how are people going to respond to Sarah? Because I realized, like, even when I first went into the ministry, this is nothing compared to you, and I really shared some personal things about myself. And to this day, people can kind of have the tendency to maybe throw those things back at you when you move. You're so far beyond. You're not that person anymore. And that's what I felt when I read this, that it would always be someone.
Yes. And I'm sure there are going to be those people too, but I feel so confident that this is what God wanted me to do. Although, you know, after I heard from my aunt and my cousin, I haven't really been promoting it like I probably would have, and I probably will again, but I just took a step back and I prayed a lot about it, and I just asked for a sign or a message if this isn't what you wanted me to do, because why would I put that out there?
Exactly, because it's going to help a lot of people to just be human.
And I often wonder why God allowed me to grow up near poverty in Oakland, California, with an alcoholic father, and you know, and I have cousins who can't imagine how it feels to live like that, because their parents made different choices, of course, than my parents did. But they did come up more like maybe what Booker T. Washington's descendants, what people would think, how people would think that they would come up. But I didn't, and I often wonder.
I wonder would he feel so proud of you.
I hope so.
I really believe that he would, Sarah,
I hope
in the
so.
sense that you're being truthful, you're being open, and you're an excellent writer.
Thank you.
And God wants us to use our God-given gifts.
Yeah.
If you don't use it, then
Right.
you're not being a good steward
Right.
over what he gave you.
Exactly.
If you hold back in behind criticism, in behind hurt feelings, and you don't go forward, then it's not the people that will be holding you back. It would be you.
That's true.
It would be the buck always stops with ourselves.
Right.
Yeah, and you have to go forward.
Right.
You have to promote your book.
Right.
You have to just realize that if God had not wanted you to write the book,
Right.
He would have stopped it before this
Yes.
point, Sarah, because you love God.
I do
You're
love
praying
God.
praying
I put him
woman.
first in my
Yeah.
life, and so it just, I always respected, especially my cousin, for her spiritualness and her relationship to God. And so I guess that's why it kind of took me back. But I said, God is bigger than this. He's bigger than her. He's bigger than me. He's huge. And so while maybe it is her opinion, she loved my mom, that I dishonored my mom in the book. But God can do things with that we can't.
Oh, yes. And He has a way of eventually changing people's minds.
And
But
I
even
pray
if He
about
does
that.
not,
Yeah.
that doesn't give you the green light to not do what He called you to do and continue to use your gift.
Exactly. And so that's what, I plan to do, and to keep going and because like you said, courage, it takes a certain amount of courage.
Yes, it does. To put yourself out there and be open and honest. It takes courage because there's always some criticism. But in the end, if you hang in there and if you always do what God has told you to do, you can never go wrong being obedient.
Right.
And I'm also not surprised when I read it that you just said that you got some negative feedback from family.
Yeah.
Because it always seems to begin within the family.
Right.
That it might be a little misunderstanding or hurt feelings.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yes. And by the same token, I had 2 cousins who read it. I think, as far as I know, those are the 4 family members that have read the book. Oh, my brother. And they had...
How did your brother respond to it?
raving reviews. The first thing he said, though, and me and my
I
brother
got a
have
good
a
feeling about
strange
it. I got a good
yeah. We're very close. Like, we're really close. It's like we're all we really have, because by the time my parents had me and him, they were older, and our siblings were much older than we were. So we grew up together, and we're still here in the Bay Area together. But at first, when he finished reading it, he said, "You were kind of hard on me and Mama, weren't you?" When I told him about my cousin and my aunt, he says, well, he was being sarcastic, and he said, well, if you're going to let people discourage you like that, why don't you go back to everybody you sold the book to and get your money back, and get the book and give them their money back. So that told me that I had his approval, that he was okay.
Yes.
And my other cousin, 2 cousins, they were really helpful. One and helping me to make it even better. So I'm going to revise it one day, and with his suggestions. Nothing changing my story. He really respected my story.
Exactly.
And then another cousin who said, wow, she couldn't put it down as well.
This is what I'm talking about. This is some good reading, Sarah.
Yeah.
Now, you have to get this book, okay? I don't want to share too much because we want you to get this book. It is an excellent book. Now, Sarah, as I look at the cover of the book, I notice that you have on a beautiful cross. And usually whenever someone writes an autobiography, the cover of the book tells us a lot. Okay. And you have on a cross. Now we know that in this day and time, a cross can mean anything to people.
Right.
Some it means nothing. It's just a piece of jewelry that you put on, and it's just that.
Yeah.
But for you to have put on such a beautiful cross, what does that mean to you?
Well, the reason, because I know this book would be widespread and people would get it, and I do want people to know that I put God